Good afternoon, good morning, good evening for those joining us from all over the world today. I'm Steve Marchese, the Chief Production Officer here at the Webby Awards, and it is my pleasure to moderate a panel discussion once again that almost needs no introduction, given where it currently sits within the online zeitgeist. We are truly at a turning point. It's not hyperbole, although those that know me know I'm want to hyperbole. We're talking about emerging tech like AI, blockchain, AR, VR, XR, I should say, and the metaverse. They've wildly disrupted digital design across the internet. More importantly, what's happening now in the creative realm has been something that's been a staple of marketing over many, many years. Sure, many of us had our minds blown by Photoshop's content-aware fill back with all the way to CS5 release, but tools like AI have been a staple within marketing for generations. AI-powered recommendation engines all the way back in 1998. 2013 saw the introduction of Yahoo's automated insights wordsmith platform. Steep cut there. 2014 ushered in the advent of programmatic ad buying, and we all know how things shifted in 2016 with the introduction of speech recognition virtual assistants. Yet, less than a decade later, companies are designing for an internet with even more creative possibilities than ever before. This new paradigm shift is forcing companies and creatives to personalize their toolkits, design digital experience in a smarter, more efficient way. Today's conversation, which is going to be incredibly robust, and I can't wait to jump into it, will explore how all these new agile toolkits streamline our design processes. Before we begin, just love to thank our partners once again at WP Engine, the leading digital experience platform for WordPress, who've been essential to the Webby Awards mission in honoring the best of the internet. So now we're going to do this. I have been honored to have three amazing panelists here with us today for truly an important discussion. Instead of dryly reading from a script, I'll give the floor over to Angelica Kaur of DD.NYC, Sachin Puri of WP Engine, and Adria Montiel from Be Real. I'm going to give them all a few minutes to introduce themselves, and I decided to start alphabetically. So, Adria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Steve. Hi, everyone. I am Adria Montiel, the product design lead at Be Real. We are a creative and product design studio that collaborates with a diverse range of clients from luxury, fashion, and to the tech industries. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel and allowing me to share some thoughts, because this it's very exciting, this topic of today.
All right. Angelica, you're up.
I'm Angelica Kaur from DD.NYC, and we're a leading design agency here in New York City, working on branding, web design, identity, and really pushing with the new paradigm shift into the future of design. So looking forward to sharing our insights. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. Welcome. And Sachin, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Sachin, I lead marketing at WP Engine. I've been in the industry for the past 2 decades, and I couldn't be more excited being here. And as you set it up, Steve, last 1 decade, we all have been witnessing all the changes in advertising world and how the modular architecture, multi-surface has pushed the edge for advertising, and how that has really permeated into the design and development of web and app experience. So I'm super excited to be here with this amazing panelist to have the conversation. Sachin here, looking forward.
Excellent. I'm going to start for a question with all the panelists, just to get us right into it before we dive into people's specialities and things like that. We're talking about today's current digital world, right? A place where designers and developers, they're expected to create and deliver rapidly for multiple platforms, more platforms than ever before. We're including, obviously, the metaverse in this, AR, VR I mentioned before, and in some of the ways that designers and developers have transformed, I'm just curious how you would define sort of this turning point for the internet between the sort of the 3 ways each of you approach the work that you do every day. Definitely, I'd say, let's start with Angelica, because I know that you have a background in data and development, and then must be wildly exciting for you in terms of where we're going with design these days.
I mean, absolutely. I think, data has always been something that has been coincided with developers, with analysts, maybe marketers. But at our agency, we always take the approach that design should be driven by data. And with the implementation of AI, you really understand how taking specific creative cues from AI as well that lead the design process forward. So, for us, I think the big turning point, I would say, for every agency for the design overall in this space has really been the pandemic. And when the pandemic happened, we all had to collaborate in a unique new way, only digitally, right? And so with designers and creatives having to now work with the digital tools, it's yet another paradigm shift of digital space, using AI, a toolkit, not replacing creatives, but rather helping creatives in their realizing the vision forward.
Yeah. Adria, how would you sort of define this turning point from your perspective as a designer in a space that's changing as rapidly as 1 month ago, if you will?
Sure. From my point of view, I will say that the turning point for the internet can be defined maybe as the moment when it shifts from being a purely informational tool to a kind of ubiquitous platform that has transformed basically how we live, how we work, and how we interact. Because if you remember at the beginning, internet was basically like a pure informational tool. But it's true that in recent years, the work of designers and developers has transformed significantly due to the increased demand of digital products and services, of course, because better connections, more mobile devices. So at the end, this has led to the need of more agile and more collaborative approach to product development, as well as an increased focus on user experience, accessibility, responsive design, etc. So at the end, from a point of view, these changes have also been driven by the growing influence of design thinking and the need to create products that are not only functional, but also emotionally engaging and I would say aesthetically pleasing. And so in summary, from my point of view, the turning point of the internet has been characterized by shifts towards more user-centered and design and data-driven approaches to product development.
Excellent. And then from a marketing perspective, Sachin, I know you have decades of experience in the space. What's exciting you about this particular turning point?
I think it's a really exciting time. As consumers and customers, all of us have been, like, we look at our own experience. We are a multi-platform, and the surfaces that we all touch and the consumers touch is really expanded. Back in the day, it was all TV. TV moved to PC. PC moved to smartphones. Now we're talking about IoT, talking about AR, VR, and Meta, and what have you. And it was easier when these technologies were coming to optimize them for in-platform and in-services. But as customers are omni-channel at any given point of time, at least two screens, it has become way more for marketers to be able to have strategy that cuts across different platforms. To Angelica's point, this is where data helps, but it is a double-sided sword as well, because we also have to make sure that the customer privacy and consumer privacy is kept to the epitome, which also requires first-party data to start coming in, designers and developers being aware and intelligent about how to use data to really inform across different services, privacy at the forefront and the security at the forefront. So I'm very excited how it has really pushed the envelope. And to me, it really comes down to Mac architecture, where you're thinking about microservices, API, cloud-enabled, and headless. And I know we'll touch more into this, but where data really comes to fruition, I really start to think of Mac, not just from the development standpoint, but also from design and delivery perspective.
Yeah, I mean, each of you have mentioned a number of different tools that are available to designers right now. Another, just a little bit of a softball for each of you that sort of dives into your various specialties. For our audience, who are made up of a number of designers that are curious about the future of design, what would be some of those essential tools that should go sort of in the toolkit of every designer right now? Some of the things that are out there that the three of you have been playing with that you found, not only are novel right now, but are the type of skills that they'll be important moving forward, as we go down this path. And feel free, anybody, to jump right in.
I would say
maybe
go ahead, Adrian.
Oh, no, maybe I can jump. I was thinking more in terms of software. Maybe later we can talk about the skills. But from my point of view, looking now and maybe the future, some basic tools, of course, are like graphic design software for user interfaces. We will maybe talk later about the implications that AI has on this. Of course, tools like prototyping and wireframing tools that sometimes are kind of integrated with the graphic design software as well. It depends. Video and animation software, sometimes it's quite important because to explain some interactions internally and sometimes with the stakeholders is quite important, this kind of tool, so they realize how we look, how the experience will be. So as well, of course, content management systems. Maybe we don't talk too much about this, but if you are like a UX writer or a content design profile, usually these profiles are very used to work with words, right? So these tools are super important. And of course, collaboration and communication tools like this one that we are using right now. Research tools as well. And when I talk about research tools, I am focused more in the qualitative way. Now we can talk about different types of remote testing, surveys, etc. But these are very, very important tools. And of course, analytical tools, but not because the designer has to use these tools, but has to ask the good questions in order to take this data to validate some hypotheses. This to me is the perfect toolkit that any designer should bear in mind when create an experience.
Yeah, Angelica, what are some of those questions that a designer needs to ask of the data, of the analytics? You know, when jumping in, and it feels like there's more that a designer needs to know now, potentially that's outside of the realm of design than ever before.
You know, not to sound cliche, but I think just like 25 years ago, the most important tools are taste and discipline. So ultimately, if you have those, then you can use other tools such as the ones we all use, Figma, Adobe Suite, 3D tools such as Blender and Cinema 4D to realize your vision. But ultimately, it's the vision that matters, right? And so I think that the key for a designer is to not be so rigid in staying within a specific platform or specific service, but rather be expanded into becoming a multidisciplinary designer, being open to realizing their vision, like Adria said, with video, right? Or 3D elements, and really creating a vision rather than a rigid design within a specific tool.
Sasha, anything to add to that?
I think I would just sum it up. Stories matter. Narratives matter, irrespective of what platform you are. So I think Angela nailed it right on the head. As it all connects together, customers should be able to pass through that narrative that you're trying to tell for them at that very moment of time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think, it's funny that the conversation seems to have always been around the tools, but I think what's really interesting to me is something, Adria, you brought up when we met last week before just to touch base is the skills that are needed. So I'm going to sort of transition a little bit away from the tools to sort of designing for today's internet. And what are some of the soft skills that you think that designers can develop to use and integrate with these tools successfully? We talked a little bit about expansion of one's vocabulary to use ChatGPT, right? Even better. So what are some of those things that as a designer you've found that you've had to sort of redefine a little bit in terms of your skill set as opposed to the tool set?
Sure. Yeah, from my point of view, again, to be honest, from my point of view, as a designer who use very old tools like Paint in Windows or Photoshop, yeah, again, the tools are probably the least important aspect of being a good product designer. Because beyond the tools, from my point of view, the most important thing is proactive communication between teams and something that Angelica, I think, I already mentioned, clearly defining from the beginning what problem we are trying to solve or what opportunity we are trying to achieve. No? So if this is clear, the tools become kind of secondary because they are like constantly changing, right? And can be learned. And ultimately, the most important tool you will need as a designer is your problem solving skills. and as I said, the ability to communicate effectively to the team and to the stakeholders as well.
Sachin, given your role overseeing all the marketing over at WP Engine, I think generally in terms of a skill set, the tools that are available to people for rapid prototyping, for some of those things like soft skills, what would be, how can sort of designers leverage the flexibility of certain tools to sort of refine their projects for today's internet? That's something that's really I've been curious about. Specifically, you and I have talked about headless before, specifically at WP Engine, some of the solutions you have like Atlas. How does sort of a soft skill set kind of, sort of integrate with some of the tools that are out there that people can use?
Yeah, happy to jump into it. And I'll come back to Adria's point. I think that was really valid. And as we get into artificial intelligence and AI and how that is changing, we'll talk more specifically on headless. Some of the key trends, as you were talking about, the customers are multi-channel. So the ability to think about from design standpoint that you're developing, designing, creating once and use across different surfaces is a very key important skill set just across the board. We all know headless with the approach of its technology and modern framework, it delivers performance. The performance of speed, the performance of being able to have discoverability through SEO, all those aspects come native in with headless. But the broader advantage is about the front-end flexibility. Whether you're on AR, VR, whether you're on mobile, or you are on desktop, irrespective of what the framework or the platform that customers are using, the front-end flexibility allows to really leverage the power of design to the form factor of the customer, whether it is app-like or whether it is AR-like. That's still to evolve, but headless provides that flexibility and the power to the developer to really bring it to forefront. So what does it mean for designers and content writers and marketers who love to be creative, love to think about that image, love to think about that copy? It doesn't take away. And that's the beauty of a decoupled architecture in the headless space, is that designers and creators could keep the flexibility and the knowledge base that they have built in building the content while really leveraging the power of the front end to deliver it to what the customer is feeling like at the performance speed and at the surface area that customers are looking into. So from my standpoint, this multi-channel ability is something which is natively start to develop in Designer. And you don't want to spend time in really taking an image and start optimizing to each platform. And this is me peeking into AI and how AI can help in really taking one design to a different form factor. But headless is the vehicle on which you build, because you want that power, you want that flexibility on the development side, yet not losing the creativity and all the greatness that has been developed over the period of time on the design and the content creation. I think that's a juxtaposition that we are all in, and it couldn't be any better time with the tools like AI coming in.
Yeah. Angelica, how has that changed the way that a designer needs to think about their initial design? Like over the years, maybe that would be handed off to other designers that had specific tool sets and skills for maybe mobile optimization, or somebody who's really great at three-dimensional design. When you approach the project from the beginning, knowing it's going to be in so many different touch points and so many different form factors, how does that sort of change the way that you approach design in general, for a particular project, knowing it's going to be in so many different places now, more than ever before?
Absolutely. I mean, to be frank, it adds quite a metonymous and a routine to it, because there's quite a few more breakpoints, UI kits, elements that we need to hand off to create that really epic front-end design, right? But truly, though, this is an element that we hope as designers that AI will take over. Because ultimately, if a creative is taking over the project and building the key visual and building the idea, and then having to go and do all the routine processes after, you're actually taking away the mind from the ability to go and create the next project. So this is where we really hope that in some years, with a lot of improvement, AI will be able to take over all those processes and create all the responsive screens that a designer who is creating a new website is having to do today. For example, a UI kit automated. That would be just the dream, you know. But to Sachin's point, the beauty of today's development is that we're able to realize a front end that is designed specifically for the client, specifically for the project, and use a CMS in the back so that it is ultimately flexible for the client to be able to modify it in the future. There is this notion that you cannot have both, but you can.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to switch slightly a little bit over to data, since that's something that you're sort of an expert in over here. And we're talking about sort of website analytics. We're talking about all the various data that we get back from these different touch points, right? So a designer has more data at his or her disposal than ever before. Question for you is, how can they leverage the data that they're getting back from these various touch points to kind of continue to improve the personalization of the digital experience? Because, you know, we'll get a little bit deeper into personalization, but clearly AI and some of the things that we're talking about here provide for a uniquely personalized experience for the user. How can we leverage some of the data that'll be utilized in those experiences
to further segment? So for instance, you know, like I said earlier, historically, it's been something that's been associated with developers and analysts, data itself. But, you know, at the design level, you know, internet is a better place when the end user enters an environment and it serves their needs in an aesthetically pleasing way, to Andrea's point. And if a designer is able to communicate that feedback loop and create multi-experience personalizations within the same creative vision, you're really creating magic. You're able to serve the end user while being under the same key visual idea.
Interesting. And it, you know, you mentioned before some of the places that you hope AI will take over. I think it's a good bridge to jump into, because I'm looking at the comments that are coming in and people are like, are we going to talk about AI? We're going to talk about AI. So clearly that's a topic that we're going to jump into. I'm going to start with Sachin. I have some thoughts on AI. You know, you've been around, you know, we've talked a little bit about before when we were preparing this. What were some of the initial applications of AI in design? You know, when we started, you know, where we were, where we are now in terms of AI. You mentioned early on, and I know we were joking about the content-aware fills, but that was a big sort of, for a lot of designers, especially for lay designers, that was like a massive game changer. How do you think what are some of those sort of touch points, some of those big AI integrations that you saw in marketing that were slowly kind of integrating into the design processes?
Yep, happy to. It all in the advertising world, where the customers started to touch different surfaces, it became very, very important. And data and the privacy laws allowed advertisers to touch different surfaces and really personalize the ad or the commercial to deliver to the customer at that particular moment of time, being context aware. Which also realm into, as we all have seen, what type of bidding tools you want, what programmatic, the whole era of programmatic evolved because of AI and ability to use data to surface the experience that is relevant for the customer. Then it moved into more of content. I'm sure many people here who come from the advertising world understand creative iteration, creative rotation, or dynamic creative optimization. These were core, the initial, I would say, bedrocks of AI in the design process. But I was thinking after our conversation, Steve, what are the various ways AI can help in the design and the development process? And of course, there is no limit to human innovation, but I think there are 5 buckets it falls in which how it can augment. First is automation. There is no efficiency or effectiveness that comes out of just doing the repeat task again and again. My rule is, if you do something twice, try to automate it, because high likely you're going to do it more often than not. So automation of tasks, back in the day, it was all around taking the cuts of a creative and making it available to different form factor. what shows up on social, what shows up on mobile versus desktop, etc. So areas of that, I'm sure designers would not like to take a beautiful picture and cut it for different form factor. That's an automation that can come in right off the bat. So that's category one. Second is co-creation. It is not AI or us. It is AI and us together. Co-creation has multiple examples with which we can get into. You can get a starting point. You almost have an assistant who's kind of working with you to come up with ideas and develop with you. Third is more about being data assisted or Q&A. We have been using tools where you design something and see what is the user experience is going to be. Is it accessibility compliant? Where do we want customers to engage? And those tools allow us to do the QA as well as analysis of the design right from the get-go, also for the code too. So that's category 3. Category 4, which we have talked a lot about, personalization. This is where it really starts to come together from real customer experience or what they see. And today we talk about all creative has to be built initially, but with the power of AI, the definition of creative on the real time would start to evolve as well, based on the user input that would get into. So what does that mean for storage? What does that mean for edge delivery through CDNs? What does that mean for the back end and front end would evolve, but it opens a very important aspect of the AI. And the last is actual design and developer experience itself, which by itself is huge. For example, with NLP, now if you're on your treadmill or you're outside and you want to develop a code, you can speak through it, you can talk, and voice to text converter can help you develop a code, even to a design as well. And that's a massive plus because ideas could come anywhere, as we all know. So those are the 5 buckets I feel AI would help and augment us to really propel forward. But as I said, the limit for innovation is endless. And I'm sure there are more categories would evolve. But as where I see, I think these 5 are the critical ones in which it will work together.
Yeah, Adrian, you over at Be Real, you guys have been Webby winners for years, and when Sachin mentioned the idea of AI as a co-creator really sort of sparked this idea. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys are currently utilizing AI in some of the work that you're doing, and if you sort of agree or want to add to his, I think there was a really great 5, sort of items there that people are using, if there's anything you want to add to that list as well.
Sure, Steve. I would like to talk hours about this topic because we are already implementing this. But first of all, I think that it's quite important to differentiate between short-term digital products, such as a creative campaign that may only be in the air for a couple of weeks, and long-term digital products that are used by thousands of people every day for years, such as an e-commerce website, right? So maybe for the first type of product, like a regular campaign, let's say, AI, of course, can be a potential ally, as you can imagine, when brainstorming new ideas. And in fact, I can tell you already that I was entering the briefing of the client through one of these tools. And I have to say that some of these ideas generated, of 10 ideas, 2 were really interesting to explore. So this is something that we are already doing. Additionally, if you want to illustrate these ideas with pictures or mood boards or storyboards, it is currently easy to do through different types of AI without investing too much time in crafting and with significantly less time spent, no? For the second type of digital product that, as I say, like an e-commerce, that it's more a product that is used by thousands of people every day. I think that we should bear in mind that AI can be used, let's say, throughout the design process in very different ways. What does it mean, this? For example, I don't know if everybody has in mind a typical design process, but basically it has different phases. The first one is identify and define the problem that you are trying to solve or detect the opportunity, right? Then try to collect information and insights, and then generate ideas and potential design solutions that basically are crafted based on those ideas, no? I am simplifying a lot, but I guess that you get the idea. So for each of these phases in these long-term digital products, how we can take advantage of the AI. So let me share with you some examples. No, for instance, let's say that I need to identify a problem or an opportunity. No, imagine that you are a company that you can connect the comments and complaints of your customers with this technology. So you can ask, hey, give me a roadmap for the next year with the most important issues of the company. And you have a roadmap for the next year in order with the priority, because you have the data in order to solve the customer issues. No, this from a design point of view and a business point of view, it's magic, because in the past you have to go through different spreadsheets, read the information, and this was complicated. But with this technology, it's not. Another example, let's say that I want to collect data. No, so let's say that as a designer, I want to do a competitor analysis between just comparing features. Let's say that I want to compare a virtual try-on, that I want to see the makeup in my face, with another competitors. This is something that I already did. I did a competitor analysis using this technology to see which brands has this kind of technology, so I can like go straight forward to analyze in terms of design these tools. No. Or let's say that you want to conduct user interviews. You can ask for a script in order to take advantage of that to win time, basically, no? And you can do a qualitative interview. And the good thing in the past that you have to watch the interviews in order to take notes and do the typical deck with the main conclusions. But with this technology, when you finish to the interview, you can get the main conclusions. However, I have to say, disclaimer, that people lies sometimes. So the machine doesn't know if the people is lying, but you can notice. So this is another topic, but you get the idea that you can prepare a script in a glance and you can get the conclusions in a glance as well.
Well, I think it's great. You bring up potentially one of the issues that need to be dealt with, right? The veracity of the data that's coming through, or the people lying about things. You know, it's interesting to me, Angelica. I want to not only ask you what some of the obstacles and issues might be of designers utilizing AI in their process. I want definitely start with some of the great ways that you've been utilizing it, because I don't want to get into the Black Mirror of the conversation just yet. But some of the things that you've been utilizing AI for over at DD.NYC. Talk a little bit about some of the successes, but also I'd love to shift a little bit, because I can't believe we're 35 minutes in already. This is blowing my mind. And I know we have to wrap it up soonish. Definitely start with some of the successes and some of the things you're really excited about utilizing AI in your design process, but also some of the things that people on this conversation should factor into some of the obstacles that AI presents and how you can overcome some of those things as well.
Definitely. I mean, there's the usual suspects, right? There's the imagery and copy, having relevant copy in place when you're presenting designs to customers. It works in marvelous ways. But, you know, the obstacles, and I think a lot of designers are having these obstacles and they're having to overcome them. They can really be placed in sort of three categories in our minds at DD.NYC. I think first and foremost, the designers there's a learning curve. They need to understand how to use AI, because if you open up some of these tools and you just type in something and you don't understand the commands yet, you haven't experimented with it enough, you will not yield the result you want. You may just halt the experiment. But instead, really learning the tools, just like you would any of the other tools that designers are currently using. So that's, I think, the first hurdle they need to overcome. Second, I think, is a psychological barrier that, you know, first of all, the AI will replace the designer, and really kind of this fear that this is the new frontier and we will no longer be needed. Our job will be moot. That's a major one. And I think everyone in the room that's listening to this, designers out there, do not worry about this. There will always need to be a human touch. So we believe that and others as well. So that's great. But there is another component that a lot of people don't want to talk about. It's a feeling of plagiarism almost, that can I really use this? Is this mine? And that's a point that I think is, again, you need to address with yourself. It's a psychological barrier that you need to overcome, and to think of the great artists like Murakami or Robert Longo, and the amount of assistants and painters and drawers that are working in their studios, realizing their vision, but it's still a Murakami painting or a Robert Longo lithograph. Ultimately, to realize that that's not plagiarism if it is your vision that the AI of your style is realizing. And finally, to fully incorporate the AI into the workflow, well, I think it's just patience, really. It's going to take time to perfect it. And, to kind of put it in perspective, AI is sort of like, it's sort of like an intern. You need to teach it too. You need to really work with it to get it to become a true integrated new team member within your design team.
Yeah, it's really, really well said. And I think it's interesting because we're talking about adapting to wildly quickly changing industry standard, right? Like, just as an example, we know the capabilities of GPT 3.5 and then 4, like how just within a couple of months it wasn't able to solve Wordle, and then it could solve Wordle in one quick update. So I want to talk a little bit about that, sort of how designers can adapt to what I would imagine is going to be, we're going to throw Moore's law out the window. Things are moving much, much faster than that. So let's talk a little bit, Sachin, if you for sort of the final chapter here, a little bit of the required work to sort of break down some of these changes into maybe more of a modularized format. I think that's one way of dealing with some of the industry standards and the quick changing that we're dealing with. So I question for you is what role can AI play in helping designers meet the demand for this kind of increased modularization that we're seeing out there in the world?
Yeah, I think a couple of points, the 5 areas that I highlighted. I'm going to revisit some of those, but it's been touched upon. First and foremost, I mean, AI is that analyst or an intern that you have to work with, and see the benefit that comes out of it. For example, is one of my colleagues always says, is it's easier to edit than to build from the scratch. So it gives you that initial start that you expected your team members to provide you the first draft, and then kind of build from there. Also, on the design ideas, you have this live partner as an AI you can ideate with, and that's massive. I've been a photographer for many years, and being able to ideate and visually give inputs to AI and then evolve from there is massive, in my opinion. From just creative exploration standpoint, there is no limit to it. Having a partner which is always available to you ain't gonna get tired, and always constantly getting intelligent over the period of time. So the co-creation aspect is something I would say we should adopt and embrace wholeheartedly, and that is one of the most important element to go with. Everybody understands the need and the benefit of automation, but I do think as the surfaces for customers would evolve, especially with AR and VR, it's going to bloom. For example, like on the weekend, I was talking to one of the product managers in AI, and we were talking about how if you are a consumer electronic manufacturer, and you're selling consumer electronics for a TV, and you have metadata, everything about the TV and the spatial space that you're operating on, you can literally take that device and see, okay, take this device and make it an 85-inch television and show it in the different parts of my room. And easier said than done. But if you don't have that open connectivity across all the metadata that exists about the consumer electronics or the device that you're dealing with, you'll never be able to parse through, or it will be a very static experience, if you will. So, which brings me to the other element is open web. AI and modular architecture is already pushing us to be more open and collaborative across the board. We all read about Copilot, where plugins are getting available, even for WordPress and very different services. So how does that push with more open web architecture, where people can interact, companies and brands can interact, services can be offered in this open ecosystem for design as well as development and delivery as well. And the last piece, which we will all see evolve through, is the aspect of ethics. Where do you draw the line of ethics and security is still to be defined, in my opinion, but it has to be defined as the world of AI would evolve. We talked about plagiarism, but there are more aspects and more finer nuances of ethics and regulations that have to come in, at least the standards. So it's going to be an interesting space, but I do think going back to the 5 areas that I mentioned, those are the critical areas start to develop into, both from design perspective and the development. But it is about modular architecture. It is about composable architecture. Advertising has already seen, revolutionized, transformed completely what it was 10 years ago. And web experiences or digital experience are absolutely in the right path and couldn't be better time from AI to disrupt that.
Yeah, this is a great idea. I mean, there's this, we talked about personalization a little bit earlier. There's an increased push for it. Specifically, across the different touch points we talked about. I'm curious from an artistic perspective, and this question for Adrian and Angelica, how do you keep the sort of cohesiveness of the big hero idea when it's in so many different places? A designer historically, that output wouldn't be all over the internet and in the variety of places that it is. May not be immersive. It might just be 2D. Now we're dealing with a creative idea that has to live in more places than it's ever had to live before. How do we, from an artistic perspective, how do we keep the continuity, keep the purity of the thought that you wanted as a designer to really get across to the users? How do we do that when it's fractured into so many different places?
I can start. I mean, it's, when designers come up with new ideas, they often don't come up with one, they come up with multiple. And sometimes, they get attached to a version that the client didn't go with, or the agency didn't approve, and so forth. And with the idea of personalization, having so many different channels and outlets for your art, it's actually beautiful because your different ideas can be implemented and tested. And that data of maybe the designer's vision tested in a small pool, actually winning that statistic, winning that test, maybe pushed to more channels is the beauty here, is that the creative mindset doesn't have to be so rigid anymore. It doesn't have to be limited anymore. That's, I think, the beauty of the multi-channel environment and the personalization within all those channels.
Yeah, from my point of view, again, it depends of the digital product that we are talking. One thing is a creative campaign that stays alive maybe 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And another thing, it's a product like an e-commerce that stays years and years, no? So one thing in terms of creativity, it's when you are like building brand equity, of course, AI can help you to get more ideas and be more inspired. But it's not gonna help you in terms of crafting from my point of view. I mean, it will help you, but not in terms of ideas. But when we talk about e-commerce, for instance, to me, it's quite interesting, this technology, because what will happen is that right now, we are like improving the website, we are measuring, and based on that, we are like iterating in order to improve, right? But for 1 second, let's imagine that this technology, it's inside the website. So imagine that people is training the website, okay, and at the end of the day, you have like a summary that comes from the website that says to you, hey, this PDP could be improved like that. This product detail page of this sneakers e-commerce can be improved like that, no? Choose one option and you choose one, and then it's updated in the e-commerce. So the approach, when we talk about campaigns or about products that are used by thousands of people every day, it's very, very different. So in summary, I think that the creativity will be always here, but depending your goal, will change. Will take more advantage of the AI tools or not.
Excellent. So I'm getting a notification that we have to get close to wrapping up. We've so many QA questions here. We'll grab a couple, but I'm going to finish things off. I want to thank you all. I'm going to ask a final question. I know that designers and marketers love to keep their secret stash of goodies close to the vest. A lot of people are asking about where you find your inspiration and what some of the tools and sites that you all use. I had a question in front of me that was like, what role are these tools going to play in the future? and there is no future. It's here now. The tools have been here for a while. So I'm gonna skip that question. I'm gonna ask you all just to share some of the resources that you love for our audience of designers that are here. Play one or two things that they can utilize, whether it's a tool or a site, or even if it's analog inspiration, it doesn't matter. I know that we're getting a lot of people asking about what inspires the three of you. So I'm going to end with that. And then we'll get into a little bit of Q&A before we go. So Sachin, floor is yours to start with that.
Yeah, you bet. I will share my sources, and I leave with 3 questions that I would say every designer should ask themselves. And I have been asking that for decades for now. Sources are: be ready to be spammed. I go sign up for newsletters across the board. I sign up for sessions like these because inspiration could come from anywhere. Talk to a designer, talk to your developers, go talk to your peer group outside. And that's how I keep myself current as well. I read a lot of different news and what is developing in the market. But here are the 3 questions that have not changed for me: AI, pre-AI, post-AI. 3 questions you want to ask for every experience is: 1, what do you want the customer or the user to feel when they're exposed to the design that you have built, the experience you have built? Feel is, it's like a hot day outside. You walk into an air conditioning room. That's the feel of instant gratification that you get. That aesthetics, what do you want them to feel? Second, we talked about e-commerce and performance marketing. The second question is, what do you want them to do? What's the next best action? What is the second best action that you want them to do? A lot of AI tools are built around this behavioral science. And the third one, which in my opinion is the hardest one to do, and I'm keen to see where AI goes, is what do you want them to believe? Believe is a long-term aspiration. It's an area where you have to constantly deliver as a brand to build that longer-term belief in the customer and the consumer that you're engaging with. So I'll leave you with those 3 questions. They haven't changed: pre-data, post-data, but data is only going to help us enable better with those 3 questions as we're designing the design and development for today, because future is here right now, right here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Angelica?
Oh, well, the Webbys, of course.
Was that a loaded question? I threw a little softball out there for sure.
But Sachin, by the way, I'm going to have to use that one, the air conditioned room feeling. That's great. The truth is, I think the first thing I'd say is, of course, looking at all the design social networks out there. It's great. It's a resource. But ultimately going outside and looking around, really opening your eyes and seeing what's happening in the world. And it doesn't have to be in graphic design. It could be in nature, and echoing that and bringing that back into design. And I think that's where, again, taste comes in to play, to really understand how colors, gradients, and so forth play out in a sunset, in grass and so forth. And so in real world, but also more than anything, I think looking at other industries, just like Uber was not created by taxi drivers and Airbnb was not created by Hilton, you really have to have an open mindset and come from another industry perspective to innovate something. If you really want to push the boundary, look into other industries and how that may become relevant in an industry you're working to design in. So those would be my 2 big ones, besides, of course, the Webbys.
Thank you. Adrian, your perspective on that?
Sure. On my side, I get inspiration talking with people, with users, with customers, with people overall. I like to listen their histories, how they feel, how they think. Nature as well. I think that it's always a good source of inspiration, because basically we are copying nature and adding technological layers on top. And books. I recommend to you read a lot of books. I always get new ideas from books. And if we are talking about specific technological tools, of course, ChatGPT, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Invoke, and Adobe Firefly. These ones are like technological tools to get inspiration as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm gonna there's so many questions. This is one of the most active commenting threads I've seen in a long time. I'm gonna jump into a question right here for the group that came from our audience. If data is driving design, how are you guaranteeing unique creative solutions I think this is a great question, by the way, versus data recommending similar approaches regardless of the product or the industry? So that's a really great question, in the sense that the more we integrate data into, our design, how are we guaranteeing unique creative solutions as opposed to something that just works, right? If we know that the oval button works 10 times better than the rectangular button, how do we guarantee a future where an internet is not just oval buttons everywhere we go? So that's the question for the group here, I think. And I think Sachin might have a different perspective as a marketer versus the designers here, but I'm throwing that out to the group for sure.
All right, I'll go with it. I think there are two elements. One is the data that is available to everybody. And then second is the data that is available to you as well. I mean, there are a variety of different terms: third-party data, first-party data. Over the time with privacy, third-party data continue to go down, first-party data continue to go up, and our dependency change. So the first-party data is where the differentiator starts to come in. So I would urge build on a CDP, a customer data platform, and really try to integrate your first-party data so that you can make a lot better decisions around that. And second, there is nothing better than the years and years of intelligence and insight that designers and developers have developed over the period of time. And that human instinct, that human experience could never, and human creativity can never be replaced by the data. And that is where the co-creation start to come in, and the differentiation as well, if you will. I believe, and I have seen this, data helps you make better decisions, but at the end of the day, you make the decisions. So see that as two things coming together, and that's where, in my opinion, the differentiation starts to come in. I'd love to hear from Angela and Adria. What do you feel from practitioner's standpoint?
I would echo what you said, Sachin. I think it's really oversight ultimately. It's back to that analogy of an intern. You really have to have oversight. And by the way, Stephen, in an internet where it's all oval buttons, the rectangular button is really going to stand out.
Exactly. That's what I was hoping for sure.
Adria, go ahead.
No, sure. I love this question because at the beginning, some years ago, I thought that data-driven was the best approach. But after some learnings, to be honest, I think that it's good to be data-informed and take decisions based on that. Because at the end, let's say that you have like a fashion luxury brand and you realize that the square button works really well when adding to the bag. But this breaks completely your brand and your brand equity. Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful, because if you break the brand, then it's not going to work well in the future. So I think that it's good to be data informed in order to take the decisions where you as a company / brand, you want to go, because this is key to differentiate yourself from competitors.
Excellent. Well, we're gonna wrap up. It's 1:55. I want to thank Angelica Kaur from DD.NYC, Adria Montiel from Be Real, Sachin Puri from our partners at WP Engine. Thank you for joining us. I can't believe an hour went by. We haven't even gotten into it. So I hope that we can do it again. And want to wish everybody that tuned in have a lovely rest of your day. And thanks again. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.